Okay, good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Today we are learning Maseches Zevachim Daf Nun Ches, and we're starting a new parak, Baruch Hashem, Parak Kodshei Kodshim. And this parak is going to be, this daf in particular, today's daf, is going to be discussing a few different topics, but one of the primary thrusts of the daf today is what is the actual location of the Mizbeach as it's related to the Heichal. So again, we have this image that we have this tall building that's the Heichal that leads into the Kodesh HaKodashim.
In the picture.
I know, I didn't bring it. I don't even have anything in my Gemara. The art scroll does. And in front of the Heichal is the Mizbeach. What is subject to a Machlokas Tanoim is what exactly was the location of the Mizbeach. So let's just say my hand right here is the Ulam and the Mizbeach is here. Is it that the Mizbeach is directly opposite the doors, or is it north of the doors, or is it south of the doors, or is it in the middle? We're going to discuss all of that today. Fascinating discussions, all predicated on this Mishnah that we're about to start. Daf Nun Ches Amud Aleph, top word, top line. Says the Mishnah, Kodshe Kodshim sheshachton berosh hamizbeach. Now we know that Kodshe Kodshim have to be shechted in the north. Okay, what if you shecht kodshe kodshim, which have to be shechted in the north, on top of the mizbeach? Is the top of the mizbeach considered north or is it considered south? Because that's never what we discussed. We were always discussing doing the shechita not on the mizbeach, but on the floor of the azor, of that room. So is it considered to be the north or the south? This is machlokes tanaim. Rabbi Yossi Omer ki'ilu nishchetu betzafon. It's as though you slaughtered them in the south. That's what the Tanakama holds, Rabbi Yossi. In the north, excuse me, thank you. It's Ke'ilu Nishchetu B'Tzafon. Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Mechatzi HaMizbeach V'Ladarom Kedarom. Mechatzi HaMizbeach V'Latzafon Ketzafon. Now, our Mishnah doesn't say what they're arguing about in regards to the location of the Mizbeach. It doesn't say that. It just says, according to Rabbi Yossi, if it's done on top of the Mizbeach, it is Ketzafon. And according to Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, no, it depends. The northern half of the top of the Azara, that's going to be considered Ketzafon. And the southern half is going to be considered Kedarim. So the northern half for the Kodshe Kodshim is kosher. On the southern half, the Korban would not be kosher. North is north and south is south.
Was it to the north of the Mizbeach or just the northern side of the?
Everyone agreed that immediately north of the Mizbeach was totally 100% kosher. That everybody agreed.
Because it was only when it was immediately north, not Keneged.
Correct.
Okay.
We never learned about Keneged. We only learned on
But the assumption, the way we understood it was to the north of.
To the north of.
That was like the southern border.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. That's correct. The only thing that's an exception to that rule is Bein Ha'ulam LaMizbeach, that according to some Tanoim, that was considered normal. Right. So there were three shitas. Everyone agreed to one shita, which was whatever was exactly, if this is a Mizbeach, but everything was north, but parallel to the 32 amos of the width of the Mizbeach, everything north that's the ideal place. Rebbe held the side away from the Ulam was also included, and I believe it was Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda here, I believe it was him, who held that the inner alley between the Mizbeach and the Ulam was also considered to be.
Right. So that would line this. That's. Yeah.
It potentially lines up with this. Potentially, I mean, you'll see. It's more complicated than that, but yeah, it does seem to align. Amar Ravasi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Omer Haya Rabbi Yossi, Kule Mizbeach B'Tzafon Kai. Rabbi Yochanan said, and this is what we're going to spend some time on today. The Mizbeach was located in the north. What does it mean the Mizbeach is located in the north? It means that if this is the Ulam, that the Mizbeach is located at the 50-yard line and beyond. So the doors here of the Ulam, right in the middle, the doors of the Heichal, doors of the Ulam, the southern part of the Mizbeach is oriented at the base, and therefore the whole 32 amos north of that line that's all tzafon. That's how Rabbi Yossi is understood by Rabbi Yochanan. So says the Gemara, I don't understand. If Rabbi Yochanan's right that the whole Mizbeach is to the north of the midline, and in fact the whole Mizbeach is in the Safon, umay ki'ilu. Why does it say ki'ilu? Look at our Mishnah. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yossi Omer, ki'ilu nishchat b'tzafon. What do you mean, Rabbi Yochanan? If you're saying that the whole Mizbech is in the Tzafon, what do you mean Ke'ilu? It's not Ke'ilu. Rashi calls this out perfectly. Rashi says, Rashi says, my Ke'ilu, third line, Havadai b'Tzafon nishchat. The whole Mizbech is in the north. What do you mean Ke'ilu? So the Gemara says, relax, let me teach you some Torah. The Gemara says, we need it to be on the side, which is a hint to the lower part of closer to the floor. I might have thought that it needs to be not on the Mizbech. That's too high off the ground. We have a height maximum. It needs to be close to the ground. Veleka, and we don't have that here. And maybe everything on top of the Mizbech wouldn't count, even though it's in the north. Kamash Malan. So that's a chiddush that the word Ke'ilu teaches us, is that even though it's on the Mizbech and it's not Al Yerach, it's on the side. Afal Pikain, the din is that if you do this korban on the top, according to Rabbi Yossi, it is still kosher. So says the Gemara, Amr le Reb Zera le Ravasi. Reb Zera says to Ravasi, let's remember that Ravasi quoted Rav Yochanan saying that Rav Yossi held that the whole Mizbech was in the north. Elamayata, if that's true, that Rav Yossi means that it's in the north, and then how do we then understand Ula Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, the second shita, who says it's half and half, that the northern part is kosher for kachay kachim, the southern part is not? It must be hachanami dechetzio b'tzafon v'chetzio b'daram. If Rabbi Yochanan held that Rabbi Yossi, the Tanakama, held that the whole Mizbech was in the north, and therefore everything on top is kosher for kachay kachim, must be that Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda holds that the Mizbech is midline, and therefore the northern part of the Mizbech is the north 16 amos is tzafon, and the southern 16 amos is darom. Says the Gemara, if you want to say that that's actually what's going on, that Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda holds that the Mizbeach was perfectly centered with the Ulam, that's not true. The Atu de Amris Mishmed Rabbi Yochanan, you, Ravasi, you yourself said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, not like that. How do we know that that's true? Because Modi Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda himself holds Shim Shachtan Kenegdon Bekar Kapsula. So let's say we have our Mizbeach, and let's say that we taka did hold that there was a centered Mizbeach. The northern 16 amos were in the north. The southern 16 amos were in the south. So what does it mean when the Gemara says that Im Shachta Kenegdon Bekar Kapsula? It means that whatever the orientation is, let's say that the Mizbeach is to the north. It's on the fifth amma north of the center line, which is in the north. And then you remove the Mizbeach and Ki'ilu, it's on the floor. Had it been on the floor, Psula? Why would it be Psula? Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda holds that anything north is north and anything south is south. So if the Mizbech had really been positioned centered relative to the Ula, and the korban was done on the top of the Mizbech but north, so why is it that if it was on the ground next to the Mizbech, it wouldn't have been kosher? Of course it should have been kosher in the north. So it can't be that you're right. So Amar Le, Rav Asi says back to Reb Zera, Hachi Kama Reb Yochanan. Let me tell you what my Rebbe said, says Rav Asi. Shnehem Mikra Echad Darshu. Really, Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda learn from the same pasuk. What's going on here? The pasuk says, "V'zavachta Allah es olosecha ve'es shalamecha." We sacrifice on it olos and shlamim. Rabbi Yossi Savar, Rabbi Yossi, who's our Tanakama, who says that it's all tzafon and everything on top of the mizbech is kosher, 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 are going to be good. What does he say? Savar kulo la'ola v'chulo l'shlamim. The entire top of the mizbech is kosher for the ola and for the shlamim, irrelevant of its position. Only because there's a drasha in Chumash. The Torah says that when you shecht on top of the mizbech, we don't know what the positioning is right now. Rav Yochanan is just saying it's a machlokes in psak from the pasuk. The pasuk holds you're allowed to do the tzafon. You're allowed to do kachay kachay on top of the mizbech. I don't care about its orientation because the pasuk says v'zavachtala. The Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda Savar chetzio le'ola v'chetzio l'shlamim. He holds only half seats. Why? Not because of the positioning again, but rather because the Yisal Kedai Toch Kulo le'ola kasher. If you want to say that the entire top of the mizbeach is absolutely kosher for an ola, so hashta kula le'ola kosher kula l'shlamim miboya. I don't need a brisa to tell me that the shlamim is kosher. If it's kosher for the ola, which has a limited scope of where it can be shechted, only in the north, then pashut that it's kosher for shlamim. So he says that can't be what's going on. It has to be that the halacha for ola and shlamim must be different, and therefore he holds halfsies. That's why he holds not because of positioning, but because of pshat in the pasuk. So this is Rav Asi's response to Rav Zera. The understanding of the pasuk of his Zavachta is that according to Rav Asi in the name of Rav Yochanan, according to Rav Yossi, everything on the Mizbeach is kosher, irrelevant of the positioning, both for Ola and for Shlamim. And according to Rav Yossi, Rav Yehuda, only half is kosher, and that's on the north half. The southern half is not. But again, not because of positioning, but rather because it's the right way to understand the pasuk. The Idach, what would Rabbi Yossi say about that? No, Isrich, we still need to quote the part about the Shlamim. Why? Salkadaita Chamina, this is so brilliant. Ola hu dedachik le makom. Maybe the Torah went out of its way to say a chiddush, that an Ola, which is only allowed to have a korban be shechted in the north, it has a limited space where the korban can be done. So the Torah was mechadesh, that afal pi, that we may not be in the north klape measurements. But Vizavachta, the Torah gives us an expansion of the typical rules of Tzafon to say that if you're on the Mizbeach, even if you're not in the Tzafon, it's an appropriate spot for Kadshe Kachim. That's how we would understand it. But Aval Shlamim, Delo Dachik Makom Emolo. I might have thought that by a Shlamim, which could be anywhere, I might have thought that the halacha would have been different, that on the Mizbeach, we didn't need a leniency for Shlamim. Therefore, maybe that's not allowed on top of the Mizbeach, Kamash Emolo, Kamash Malan, that in fact, the top of the Mizbeach is kosher for both of them. Halfway down on Nun Chesem and Aleph, a machlokes Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. Do we say that if the kadshe kachim were shechted on the mizbeach that it's kosher, Rabbi Yossi, or do we say like Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda that it depends? The northern half is kosher, the southern half is not. Two different versions we saw in the Gemara. One was positioning of the actual mizbeach relative to the ulam, and one was not that. It's just a drasha in the psukim. Yes, please. I was hoping that you had one. Thank you. So says the Gemara Gufa, we have to go back to a line that we saw before. Amar Ravasi, Amar Rav Yochanan. We said a couple lines ago, Modi Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, Shem Shachtan Kenegdan Bekarka Psulos. We said that Ravasi had said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda would have held that if a mizbech was done on top, if a korban was done on top of the mizbech, an ola, which needs to be in the tzafon, if we would have removed the mizbech and brought the korban straight down to the floor beneath, we said it would have been psula, even had it been in the north. So that doesn't make any sense. So says the Gemara, Amalei Ravacha mi difti l'Ravina, my kenegdan bekarka. What did the brisa mean when it said kenegdan bekarka? Ilema ama yisod ama sovev. If you want to say that Kenegdan Bekarka means that you didn't do it on the top of the Mizbeach, but you did it on the Sovev, which was a ledge that kicked out an Amma from the top of the Mizbeach, or all the way down, but on the Yisod, that can't be, because that's not Karka. Ha Gufe Mizbeachu. It can't be the Pshat and Kenegdan Bekarka is that you're talking about the Sovev or you're talking about the Yisod. That's mamish part and parcel. Remember how we built it? 32 Amma frame, rocks, sludge, smooth, 30 Amma. No, that's all Mizbeach. You can't say that Kenegdan Bekarka means on the Sovev or on the Yisod. That's so says the Gemara. That can be first of all Mizbeach uveod my Kenegdan Bekarka. What is? It's not Karka. It's not. We're not on the ground. Maybe we can make mechilos, we could make tunnels, and we could do the korban under the floorboards of the Azara. That's not allowed. You can't put a mizbeach underground. There are very strict rules about how to build a Beis HaMikdash. You think they're going to have some satellite mizbeach 20 feet on? This is not the way things work. How do we know this? Tanya. We have a brisa. The brisa quotes a pasuk from Shemos. The pasuk says, "Mizbach Adama ta'aseli sheyehi mechubar be'adama." It needs to be close to. It needs to be connected to the Adama. Shelo yivnenu lo al gabe mechilos. You're not allowed to build them in tunnels. V'lo al gabe kipin. It also can't be built on mounds. The floor of the Azara is the only place to build a mizbeach. That's it. So you can't tell me. Well, let's reject our first one. You can't tell me it's the sovev or the yesod. Those are part and parcel of the mizbech. That cannot be what Kenegdan Bekarka means. You also can't tell me that it's tunnels because the Brisa says it's not allowed. Says the Gemara, what did we mean when we said Kenegdan Bekarka? So then the Gemara gives a bit of a wild answer, which needs research, but the Gemara's response is, what we're talking about is, if you made the mizbeach smaller, instead of making the mizbeach 32 by 32, say you made it 22 by 22, and now you have 5 extra amos on each side, right? 10 amos, it was 32, now it's 22, so 5 extra amos on each side. So if I make the Mizbeach 22 amos squared instead of 32 amos squared, that extra space that should have been Mizbeach, but you built it small, that's Kenegdon Bekarka. That's what the Gemara concludes. And if you did it there, no, it's not kosher. That footprint should have been Mizbeach. You built it small, you shouldn't have built it small. What I would love to learn is there a minimum? What is the Torah's minimum for the Mizbeach? We know that things have to happen. We need a sovev, because there are some korbanos that require a sovev. We know that the top of the Mizbeach has a keren, has the 4 kerens, and within that we have a walking space, another amma before you get to the fire itself. How small can the Mizbeach actually be? Well, the Gemara doesn't discuss that, but the Gemara does seem to suggest that the Kenegdon Bekarka is, if you make the Mizbeach smaller than the normal 32 square amos, what then would be the din if a korban was done on what should have been the footprint of the Mizbeach? Okay, what we're going to do now is speak about the Ma'aracha Shnia. On the top of the Mizbeach, there were 2 fires. There was a larger pyre where a lot of the korbanos was done. There was also what's called the Ma'aracha Shnia, a little bit smaller. Its location was hyper-specific, and we're going to go into some spatial thinking and mathematics in order to figure out exactly where the Mizbeach is based off of this. So let's look at this din. Ma'aracha Shnia, what was the location? Amar Reb Zera, Efshar Isa Laha de Rabbi Yochanan v'lo Tanin ala b'masnisen. Is it possible that Rabbi Yochanan, referring to the Rabbi Yochanan that we started with today, that suggested that Rabbi Yossi held that the Mizbeach was fully in the north side of the Mizbeach, the whole thing, the bottom southern part of it was at the midline of the door of the Ulam, and 32 amos into the north, all in the north? Rabbi Yochanan said that, and there's no Mishnah to back him up? Can't be. That's too important of a din. So says the Gemara, Nofak dak ve'ashkach. Okay, so Reb Zera went searching, and he found a Mishnah. He found a Mishnah that agrees with Reb Yossi, agrees with Reb Yochanan's understanding of Reb Yossi, that the whole Mizbech was in the north. Ditnan. The Mishnah writes, this Mishnah we have learned before in Maseches Tamid. Beiru misham atze te'ena. We picked out wood from a te'ena tree. Yafim. They were nice ones. Lisader ma'aracha shniya shel Torres, to make the second pyre on top of the Beis Hamikdash. Where was this second pyre positioned on the top of the Mizbeach? So very detailed. Keneged keren ma'arabis dromis. It was on the southwest corner, so the corner closest to the Heichal, but bottom, south and close to the Heichal. It's on that corner. Mashuch min hakeren klapei tzaf on arba amos, moved on that left side of the Mizbeach, 4 amos upward. How much wood was put there? The omed, the volume was chamesh sain gechalim. It was 5 sa of wood that would turn to embers. Uve Shabbos be'omed shmona sain gechalim. It was more. Instead of 5, it was 8 on Shabbos. Shesham hayunos and shnei bezich elevon shalechem apanim. Because on Shabbos they did more on the fire. Okay. Let's review and then let's discuss. So if I'm the Mizbeach right here, and over here is the southern part. So the front southern part. Let's do this a little bit better. This is the Mizbeach. This is north. This is south. So it's on the southwest corner, but 4 amos in. Right here is where they would build the Ma'aracha Shniya. But the Ma'aracha Shniya had a din. The Ma'aracha Shniya had to be Lifnei Hashem. What does Lifnei Hashem means? Opposite the doors of the Heichal. Here is some construction information for you. The doors to the Heichal, the second door, not the front. The Ulam was the outer chamber, and the inner chamber was the Heichal. The outer chamber's doors were 20 amos wide. The inner chamber's doors were 10 amos wide. Very important information for today. Let's remember, outer chamber is 20 amos, inner chamber is 10 amos, those doors. We need the Ma'aracha Shniya to be opposite the doors, possibly only the Heichal doors, but possibly even the Ulam doors, which is going to be a feature soon. This is what we need to know about the Ma'aracha. So again, it's on the Mizbeach. It's the southwest corner, right next to the Ulam, which is right here. But the 4 amos in puts it in the space which is Lifnei Hashem, opposite the doors. Umay Simna, anywhere within the door frame. anywhere within the door frame. I first learned the Gemara like you just said, 50-yard line. It's not what I learned it wrong, the whole thing. And the second time I'm like, no, I learned that whole thing wrong. Half my notes in pen are wrong. I totally misunderstood it. It is not that way. It just has to be Lifnei Hashem. Anywhere within the door frame. That's what it has to be. We're going to start with the assumption of the inner door frame, and then we'll see that there are some shitas that the kedusha of the ulam is the same kedusha of the heichal, and therefore they're both lifnei Hashem, and that widens the berth, the porch for us to say it's lifnei Hashem. That would be a kula. Umay simna. What is the sign over here? What do you mean? What is the sign? Take a look at Rashi. Umay simna. Mahu hasimin. Shehukva lehem marocha shniya ulhaktoras abazichin karen ma'aravis jomus umashuch arba amos mina karen ulutzafon. How did you figure this out? The southwest corner, 4 amos. How did you get there? How did you get there? Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yosihi, Titania. We have a brisa. Top of Nun Chesamid base, heading to the bottom of the page. We'll end on the last 2 lines here. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Zeh siman, add the word biyodcha. This is the following siman. Kol hanital bifnim litnon bachutz. Anything that's taken from inside the heichal and brought to the outside. Eino nitan ella bisamuch she'ein lifnim. The only place it can be is the closest thing to the inside. So obviously it's going to be on the westernmost side of the mizbeach, because that's the side of the mizbeach that's closest to the ulam. V'chol hanital bachutz litnon lifnim. Anything that's taken from the outside and brought to the inside, it has to be taken from the outside, but only from a spot that is lifnei Hashem, west side of the mizbeach, opposite the doors. But we don't know what halachos these phrases are referring to. 2 versions of the Gemara. Version number 1, Nun Ches Amud Beis, 4 lines down. What is the case where something is taken from the inside and brought to the outside? That doesn't work, because shirayim is behedyak sibahu. I don't need Rabbi Yossi for that. I have a pasuk for that. The pasuk says, "Al yisod mizbach ha'olah asher pesach ol moed." And furthermore, so we know that doesn't make sense. Kol hanital b'chut linam bifnim ma'inu. We just said we don't know what the answer is from inside to out. What is outside to in? If you want to say we took some of the coals, some of the embers from the top of the mizbeach, from the outer mizbeach, and brought it into the pnim, into the heichal, no, because behedjik sibu there too. Shteit and chumash. We don't need a brisa for that. We don't need a mishnah for that. We know what's going on with Yom Kippur and the coals. We don't need that. Ella says the Gemara. You're right. That's not what the top line means in the name of Rabbi Yossi, that brisa. Ella says the Gemara. Kol hanital bifnim litnon bachutz. Anything that's taken out of the heichal and put onto the outer mizbeach. What's that talking about? Well, obviously it's something that's not in chumash, because you already tried other examples. What's not in chumash? Shnei bezichei levona shelechem aponim. Tegamre mishirayim. The brisa is teaching me something that's a tushtel from Shirayim. It's not stated in pasuk. The brisa Chazal teach us that the shnei bazichin, that's something that's nital bifnim litnon bachut. We take the bazichin from inside and we put it on the outside. Good. Third of the way down. Hanital bachutz litnon bifnim. What did Rabbi Yossi mean in the brisa on the top of the page of something that was outside on the outer mizbech and brought inside? That's gachalim dechol yoma v'yoma. That's not state in chumash. That's the Gamra Migachalim Shema Kippurim. But again, the Brisa made a tzushtal from what the pasuk said to teach us not Yom Kippurim. That can't be. But Kol Yoma de Yoma. We brought the Torah there. We needed it to be hot. Where are you getting the coals from? Marocha Shniya. Good. Umay Kasavar. Okay. Remember what we're trying to chase here. Chazal say that the Marocha Shniya is on the southwest corner, 4 amosim. Mehechatesi. Umay kasavar. Now let's ask this question right. What was the positioning of the mizbeach such that we knew that it had to be 4 amos off the corner? Because remember our parameter. It has to be lifnei Hashem. So if you're moving 4 amos north, why would you do that? To get to lifnei Hashem. To make sure that you're opposite one of those doors. So by definition, that teaches us about the positioning of the mizbeach. So let's see version number 1. Where are we? Umay kasavar, halfway down. Ikasavar kule mizbeach bedrom koi. Do the math with me. If the mizbeach is positioned fully in the south, that means that the top of the mizbeach is at the midline of the doors, and the mizbeach is 32 amos. So that means if I'm all the way at the southwest corner and I do 4 amos north, I'm not Lifnei Hashem. I'm way off of Lifnei Hashem because Lifnei Hashem is 27 amos away from me. So says the Gemara, if you want to say that the whole entire thing was B'daram Koi, Esrim V'Sheva Boy Lemesi, you're moving 4 off the corner. The Mizbech is 32 amos, and the top of the Mizbech is midline. And if you want to say that it has to be Lifnei Hashem, let's talk about the Heichal, that only the north side of the Mizbech, if that has to be Lifnei Hashem, only the top 5 amos are opposite the Heichal door. Because it's 10 amos. The Mizbech is midline. The north part of the Mizbech is midline. Only the top 5 amos. 4 amos? No. Esri v'sheva boy lemesi. That doesn't work. So therefore the Gemara says, even if you want to say that we're talking about the ulam doors, which are 20 amos wide and 10, that still doesn't work. Then 10 are part of the Mizbeach now. 10 are opposite the Mizbeach. Which is machlokes. Do we say the kedusha of the ulam, the outer antechamber, is the same as the heichal? If that's true, fine. But the math still doesn't work. Because if the Mizbeach is midline to the doors of the ulam, then not the top 5, but the top 10 amos are going to be Lifnei Hashem. You still only said 4, you need 22. You're way away. And if we do say that the Heichal Ulam Archadi, Esrim V'tarti Boy Lemesi. Not 4, that's not Lifnei Hashem. The Ikasavar, last of the short lines, at Chetzio B'tzafon V'chetzio B'darom. If you want to say that perhaps the Mizbeach was dead centered, so then 16 amos are north of the midline of the doors. 16 amos are south of the midline of the doors. Let's do the math. The middle is 16, right? Only 16. Let's just do the math. I'm on the corner, 4 amos. Am I opposite any doors? Well, if the midline is 16 and the doors of the Heichal are 5, I'd have to move 11 to get opposite those doors. If the midline is 16, even if you want to say that the ulam is kosher, you still need 6, not 4. Miman of Shach, you're still not Lifnei Hashem with this version either. So let's just read this inside. No, to get to the Lifnei Hashem, because the 16-yard line of the 16-yard line of the Mizbeach is midline, then how far are you from the southwest corner? Chatzrei. In order to get to 5, 16, there's only 5 left. You have to move at least 11 amos. Chatzrei. And v'inami, it should be v'inami. Again, first of the long lines right there. Even if you want to say Lifnei Hashem is with the doors of the ulam, that's fine. But the midline is 16 amos, and that means we have 10 amos of Lifnei Hashem. It's still not 4 because 16 minus 10 is not 4. It's 6. So still, what does the Mishnah mean? How can you say that the Ma'arach Hashniya is opposite the Eichal at 4 amos off the southwest corner? Elolav. Says the Gemara, Mishum de Kasavar Kul Mizbeach B'tzafon Koi. This is so sophisticated. This is how Rav Yochanan did this math. It has to be that the whole Mizbeach is in the north. What does that mean? That the southern part of the Mizbeach is midline. Right? If this is my Mizbeach. Here, the southernmost part is centered with the doors of the Ulam. And says the Gemara as follows. The Hani Arba Amos as follows. Amma Yesod, right? If I'm moving all the way from south to north, the first Amma that I encounter is the Yesod. The second Amma I encounter is the Amma Sovev, is the Sovev that you can walk around. The Amma Makom Kranos, the third indentation is Kranos. You can't put the Maracha there. And the Amma Makom Ragle Kohanim, that's also a walking space within the Keren, within the 4 Kranos, so that the Kohen could walk around the fire. And if you go any further than that, you're done. Let's explain. If the southern part of the Mizbeach is midline, you have a total of 5 amos to get out of Lifnei Hashem. So says the Gemara, the first 4 you can't do anything with. The first is the Amma. The second is the Soviv. The third is the Keren. The fourth is where the Kohanim walk. You only have one amo left. So don't move more than 4 amos. That's it. You're done. That's what lifnei Hashem means. Therefore, Rabbi Yossi has to be that the Mizbeach is tzafon. The whole thing is tzafon. Because otherwise you can't make sense of the Bryce of the Mishnah in Tamid about the Marach Hashniya that it's from the southwest corner for lifnei Hashem. It's only one way to have it. Amar Avada Barava, Hamani, I disagree with you. Lav Dafka, that our Mishnah is Rabbi Yossi, who says 4 amos. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda, the Tanya. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Mizbeach memutza ve'omed be'emtza ha'azara, an iteration that we saw under Rabbi Yossi, right? We saw this already, that perhaps the Mizbeach is 50-yard line. V'shloshim v'shtayim amos hayulo, and of course the Mizbeach is 32 amos square. Eser amos keneged pischo shel heichal, and the center 10 amos are opposite the center 10 amos of the heichal, right? And then what he says is achas esrei mikan, ama mikan, ve'achas esrei ama mikan. Let's just do the math. If you have 10 amos centered perfectly, 10, so 32 minus the 10 is 22, which means that there's 11 on each side of the heichal doors. So says the Gemara, achas esrei mikan, nimsa mizbeach mechuvan keneged heichal. Obviously the mizbeach is centered, and the Gemara therefore assumes that this is a good move. No, we learned about this. What's the problem? If we're centered and the middle line of the Mizbeach is 16 amos of the Mizbeach, in order for me to be lifnei Hashem, I can only move 5 amos off because I'm at the midline of the Heichal doors, which are 10, which means I only have 5 left of lifnei Hashem. 16 minus 5 is 11. So says the Gemara, the Rabbi Yehuda, chatzri by the Mesi. It's still, how does midline work for Rabbi Yehuda? The kasavar, even if you want to say that heichal ulam chad milsahi, still shis by lemesi. Even if you want to say that the mizbeach is midline to the heichal, no problem. And we're not looking at the heichal doors. We're looking at the ulam doors. Fine, but 16 minus 10, because there's 10 amos in front of you of ulam door. That's still lifnei Hashem according to the shita, but still it's not 4. So see, how can you? It's still 6. Shis by the Mesi. So the Gemara responds, Mi savras hani arba amos bahade ama yesod ve'ama soviv. Are you counting 6 with the irrelevant yesod and the irrelevant soviv? No. That's why he said 4. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, the Gemara says the Mizbeach is midline. How do we work out the 4? So a couple of things have to happen. Number 1, we have to hold that the ulam and heichal have the same kedusha. Because therefore, lifnei Hashem is not limited to the heichal doors, which are only 10 wide, but they are inclusive of even the ulam doors, which are 20 wide. And if the mizbeach is midline, that means that 16 amos are south. If that's true, says the Gemara, that means we have 10 amos of lifnei Hashem, so everything from 6 to 16 is perfect, and we don't count the yesod. That's our first amma. We don't count the soviv, which is 2. So from the second amma to the 6th is 4. Works out beautifully according to Kaftar Vaferach. The math works out great according to both of them. And that's what he says. Says the Gemara. Beautiful answer. Why didn't you say that by Rabbi Yossi? We suggested this already. We suggested it under Rabbi Yossi. You said, no, everything has to be in the north because it doesn't work. Give the same answer by Rabbi Yossi. Why did you not do that? Give the same exact answer like 10 lines ago. No. Mishum Rabbi Yehuda, Shamana le memutza behedja. By Rabbi Yehuda, the language of memutza is in the brisa. We didn't have that by Rabbi Yossi. With Rabbi Yossi, it would have been contrived. We would have had to contort to make it work. Here, the Gemara says this is exactly what Rabbi Yehuda meant. So therefore, on the bottom of Nun Ches Amud Aleph, when we spoke about the exact location of where the Marach Hashniya goes, southwest corner, up 4 amos, we either could explain it according to Rabbi Yossi, that it was all north, and it was within the first 4 amos, couldn't go much more. Or it was midline according to Rabbi Yehuda, provided that we hold that the ulam and the heichal have the same kedusha, and therefore the first 2 amos don't count, yesod and soviv, and then within the next 4 amos, you'll get to a makom kadosh. That is the end of our Gemara for today. We'll pause right here, 2 lines from the bottom. Wishing you all a beautiful night.